Welcome to our class today. Today's inspiration, we're going to be painting a watercolor mandala. Before we get in, I'll go through a few of the supplies that you'll need to get started. Ladies, give me a thumbs up that you can hear me okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. So today's inspiration is absolutely stunning. I did upload it to the chat on the screen. I also have it here in the window if you're viewing the video or recording after. And one of the things that I loved about today's inspiration is so many different colors. And always with art, you can kind of pick and choose what colors you like the best. But I love the way they held the white space and did a lot of different symmetrical designs. So one of the things that you'll need as we talk about supplies for today's class, we are going to be doing watercolors. Always join these classes with whatever supplies you have on hand. So I'm going to be using watercolors today. You can use any watercolor set you have. I have a I don't know, 12 color set, and then I have this one here. I'm just going to use this watercolor set today. It's nothing fancy. It's by a company called Kingston. It has lots of colors for me to choose what I like. In addition to your watercolors paints, you need a well or a tray to mix your watercolors. You basically bring in water and pigment to mix get the paint ready to go. And then you'll need watercolor paper. I am using 9x12 today. I have an array of brushes, small, medium, and large. I'm using primarily smaller brushes just so I have more control over the details, but grab any brushes that you wish. And if you need to, grab a different size, feel free just to grab different sizes and have them near you just in case. We are doing a symmetrical design today. So if you happen to have a pencil or a ruler handy to find the center of your canvas, you can grab that and we'll do some just dotting just to find the center so you can build your design in the center and build your way out. So if you have a ruler and a pencil, feel free to grab that. And then as always, a cup of water. Sometimes people like to use 2 cups of water for watercolor art. One is to rinse your brushes, and the other is to grab clean water in for mixing. I typically do okay with just 1 cup of water, so you can make a choice there. So we'll go ahead and get started. One of the things that I love about the inspiration today is all the colors and all the shapes. But I'm first going to grab my ruler, or if you want to eyeball it, and find the center of your canvas. So this is 9x12. So 12 inches is 6 in the middle. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a dot here to find that. I'm doing from the top to the bottom to the left and right, and I'm going to find the center. So this is 9. So 8. So it's 4.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4.5 is right about here. So I found my center, and I'm just doing a single dot for the center. And that's how I'm going to build the starting bits of my design. So my whole design is centered around this single dot. Okay? Focused around this single dot. Now, I'm not going to do a ton of sketching today. If you want to as an artist, you can. So I am going to freehand it and just be footloose and fancy free and do a symmetrical design as I work my way around. It can be very liberating to try that. If you do put a dot, I'm just going to gently erase it so I can see it, but it's not too dark. So you may not be able to see my dot on my screen, but I know it's there. So one of the really fun things about this design is you can pick any color you want and get started, and you get to choose what designs that you use. So I'm going to use, there's kind of a pretty kind of fun, and you should pick your favorite colors. I have a little bit of this plum color. Find your first color, dip your brush in a little bit of water, and grab and start bringing some paint over onto your palette over here. So if you have that palette, start mixing that paint first. And get your paint prepared before you get started painting itself. And we're going to do a couple techniques today. We're going to do wet on wet, and we're going to do wet on dry, which is how you apply the paint to your canvas. And you can, when you use a technique called wet on wet, which we'll do, you can have multiple colors kind of blend together. So I might try that even for this first step. I'm going to get a little bit of an orange ready. So I might mix a little bit of an orange and a little bit of pink just to see how it goes. So if you want to do a single color, you could just do a single color, but I'm just going to have fun with kind of two colors. And I'll bring in two colors in different areas. Perfect. So I'm going to keep my little well nearby. And this first design where your dot is, it could be a plain circle. So if you want to keep it easy with me, we could do the wet on wet technique. I'm going to do a small circle with just water. This is wet on wet. So do a small circle and paint a circular. And then I'm going to go and grab a little paint and I'm going to dip the paint right in that circle. This is tiny, but you can go as big or as small as you want. And I'm going to dip a little bit of orange in this circle. And it's really little, but that's okay. Just let it dry. With watercolors, it takes a minute for things to dry. And we typically work light to dark. So if you want to just dip in another color or two, feel free to do that. But I'm going to let that dry. So I'm just doing a circle and I have like a bunch of random colors in here and I'm going to let it dry. It's going to look like blotchy and wet and that's okay. It's going to look really cool when we're done. So let that dry. Then I want you to pick your next color. And this is what's going to be and I'm going to use a blue and I'll do that. You can see it right over here. Get another color ready while that's drying. And it can be any color you wish. You can decide how light or how dark your colors are. So if you want the color to be a little lighter, just add a little more water. I'm inspired to bring in like a two-tone blue here. So I'm just going to mix kind of two blues together. We'll have two ready anyways, just to see what happens. So I have a little bit of a lighter blue and I'm just bringing in a little water and a little pigment. With a little bit of a wet brush, you can bring the pigment over to your palette. And again, I'm not touching that. It's just sitting there and drying. So those are kind of two-tone blues. And I want to use a really small brush for some of these details. So use a brush that works for you. And I want you to hold white space here. So I want you to play with the first design. So I'm just going to do, and I want you to not touch, if you can. You can do wet on wet, or you can do, I'm just going to paint with dry. So wet brush with dry paper. And I'm just going to paint around, and this is really tiny, but any design, a symmetrical design around the circle. So it could be dots, it could be like leaves, it could be anything. I'm just going with the flow here, but we're going to have white space in between these objects. So always just take your time. Mandalas can be a little time consuming, so just always take your time. And this is fairly light. I can always add more color. For bigger spaces, we'll do another wet on wet, but this is a little easier and you can bring more water into these objects if you wish. And it's hard to get it perfect. Mine are not perfect. I'm just doing my best. Sometimes with mandalas, folks do like a lot of dotting and details to have things perfectly even. This is our first one, so just try to be as symmetrical and even as possible. It's not easy, but just take your time and enjoy the process. And while this is wet, I can go in and bring in a little bit more color. You just kind of grab another color on your plate and just touch it in and it will spread as long as this paint is wet, which is really fun. So I'll do that in a minute with my darker blue here. I'm just going to do a base color. It's really fun to see how one color can kind of bleed into another. So I'm going to go in and just do a little touch of a darker blue, just a little touch of darker blue, or maybe on the outside of these petals, just to see what happens. And then just let it dry and see what happens. I might put a tiny touch of green in some of these just to see. I love a nice bluish green color. because this is all still wet, which is really fun because that means you can do any kind of mutations of colors. It's really fun to watch how watercolors dry. So I'm just going to mix a little bit of green because that's just what I'm inspired to do. But with watercolors, you don't always have to like blend two colors. It's just a fun part of it for you to consider. And if you don't like something, you can always grab a paper towel and kind of blot it up a little bit. That's okay too. This green's pretty punchy, so I'm just going to kind of mix it in a little bit. And it's not perfectly symmetrical, but it's, you know, it's close. So you basically want to build your design out from here. So all of our designs are going to look so different. So you want to let them dry. So I have my blues and my greens mixed together. I'm going to hold white space. So I'm just going to have fun and just do another design off the top of my head, right in the interiors here. Now I have a lot of little details here. It was not my intention. I'm just doing some outlining. It doesn't have to be all small details. I'll do some big details in a few minutes. This is just kind of what happened today. And it's okay to be playful and it's okay for things to like not always be even, especially this is our first mandala together. Maybe for our next mandala class, we actually do the measurements, but it's okay just to kind of freehand it sometimes. It's all about the process of learning and experimenting. And I can always take a little bit of water and use water just to fill in this next petal. So there's no rush. I want you to take your time here. We're all doing different designs and different shapes, different colors. And I'm bringing water in so I can kind of do that dual blend just to see what happens. So I'm just bringing in some water here. It's getting it a little wet. It's pretty clear in some of these, but that's okay. I can bring paint pigment in and just mush it around. And it's another great way of playing with what does the water on water technique look like? What does the water, wet on wet versus the wet on dry technique? It's wet paintbrush with a dry canvas versus a wet area and where you bring in pigment. And people use these techniques in lots of different ways. And I'll bring in some more color in a minute. But you can see it's starting to form a shape. And I can always change these shapes a little bit. I can lean back in my chair as we go and make some modifications. I'm going to grab a little bit more of this pigment and I'm just going to slowly bring it in into some spots. Just doing a touch of color here and there just to see what happens. And again, you can determine how dark or how light these colors are. If you have too much water, you can use the corner of a paper towel. You could use your finger to gently blot it up. I had a little bit too much water in this petal here. So I'm just taking a minute just to use, I can use my finger. Paper towel is a little bit more of a guarantee so it doesn't leave a mark. You can play with if you want to use just one color within a petal or a design, or if you want to bring in multiple, it's up to you. But I'm using these layers to start to help build a little bit more of a structured circle. So if I want to bring these out a little bit more, it might help the whole circular design to start to form a little bit better. Over here, this one needs to come out a little bit more. So you can evolve each element to really create more of a circular area if you need to. Like if I was going to draw a perfect circle around this, what would I need to do that? It's a little bit more even. Now with watercolor, if you're new to watercolor, you're supposed to let things dry before you evolve it. Now, for today's design, if I leave white space around each of these elements, we can continue to kind of work our way out, which is really fun. But if I wanted these elements to touch one another, I would want one layer to dry entirely before another, if that makes sense. So I'm going to take a minute just to let these dry and keep working. And I'm going to think about what I want to happen next. So if I wanted to take my pencil and just do a little bit of sketching, maybe I skip every other. And play with your designs a little bit. And I don't have a number, an equal number, so that's okay. I'll just roll with it here. Just do it by visual. So I just did some pencil lines of a secondary design, and then maybe I will figure out what I might want to do next. So there's some of these kind of pointy ones, like kind of like lotus petals. So maybe I'll just do some lotus petals, some more pointy styled ones built in. So I'm just doing a little bit of design planning. And this isn't going to be incredibly even, but it's still going to be pretty. Maybe I'll bring this one over a little bit. So I'm going to bring this, I'll hold this up a little bit so you can see my pencil sketches. And I might make some of these, make one a little bit bigger. So any pencil sketches you want to do to evolve your design, you can do that. Like if you want to play with your pencil before you do another, you can do that. I thought that would be a really fun thing to do as I am letting one area dry. And I had a little bit of water bleed, so I'm just going to wipe that up really quick. I stuck my finger in it. Imagine that. Things happen. All right. So any sketching you want to do, again, there's a lot of patience involved with watercolors. So it's really important to know that as you do this. If you don't want to have, if you want to have a lot of white space in between, you could just keep going. I'm going to let my pink dry, and then I'm going to kind of work my way from there. And if it doesn't dry quick enough, then I'll just do some white spacing. And don't blow because that will spread your water if your water is wet. So that's another good thing to keep in mind. All right. So I'm just kind of gently brush away some of this pencil. And mine's kind of starting to turn a little bit, which is really fun. I wasn't planning on that, and it's okay. So I'm just going to grab a little bit more of this pink and just do a little bit of touch-up work. And I have one little spot here that bled, so I'll fix that after. But I'm just gonna do a little bit of touch-up work here, add a little bit more punch. You can add more contrast. So with watercolors, we always start with lighter colors, and then we add some more darker colors. So if your colors are light like mine, I'm gonna make some of these a little darker with a little bit more of this pigment, this rose, burgundy, cranberry kind of color. It's really fun. And if you want to add any other colors anywhere else to the other areas that are wet, go and touch and add a few more colors here and there. But I'm just going to do a little bit of touch-up work as this is drying, and I'll move on to my next area. But with watercolors, you always take your time. You can stop and let an area dry. Go have lunch or dinner and come back to it. A lot of watercolor pieces of art take a long time to paint because of the layering and the drawing that's involved. Because sometimes when you get a color just right and you don't want to mess it up, you can let it dry so you don't bleed, anything bleeds into it or around it. It's really important to consider that. Okay, cool. So that's that. I have one little spot here that's smudged. I'll go around that. And then I think about what I want my next color to be. So I might do a little bit of a white space, but I'm gonna mix another blue here. And I'm gonna make this blue a little bit more navy color. So I'm gonna add a little bit of black to this blue here just to make it a little darker. And I'm just gonna gently work on my next line in detail. So I'm just going to gently come around and I'm just gonna outline this first. And you can do wet on wet too if you wanted to here. But this is my next color. I'll use wet water and paint this in with just water. It has a little bit of color in it so you can see. This is the next shape. So you're doing big and small evolving shapes. These are bigger shapes that I'm using to evolve the design. And I used, again, my pencil to sketch some of that. I'm going to make a little bit more of this paint color so I don't run out of it. And this one's a little darker, so that'll be fun. I'm kind of going around, doing an outline. And again, you could just dip your brush in a little bit of water to move some of this pigment around. That's fine too. I'm using a small brush to kind of go around some of the pink areas. You can play with how your paint pigment is sticking on your paper. You can move the paint pigment around with a little bit of water, which is really fun. You can even go around the edges and just add a little bit more darkness around some of these edges. It's really fun to play with where the pigment sticks and where it bleeds in. So I'm playing with a little bit of darker pigment on the edges here, which is really fun. So you can play with that if you want. But I'm just going to work my way around and work on this next layer of detail. And again, you can always make areas darker. So start with lighter colors because you can always add in more pigment. And if your pink, if those little layers are even a little bit wet, just try to stay away from them. You can always go back in around them once it dries. If you want to not have so much white space or even a little bit of white space around. But I'm just going to bring in a little bit of extra dark pigment along the edges. Looks really neat. And you can always bring in more dark pigment. So don't feel like you have to make it really dark right now. Start with those lighter colors. And again, I'm using this paintbrush to, with a wet on wet, I can bring in more colors as we go because it's really wet, right? So if I want to make these blue areas like a blue-green tint or a blue and pink purpley tint, I can bring in a secondary color into this wet space and it'll all blend in together. It's really pretty. So I'm just using a little water to fill in these large petals. And then I can go in and get more pigment like this by touching down. Even if it's really wet, don't worry, it will dry. If it's too wet, you can always use a corner of a paper towel to kind of blot it up. That's always fine too. But you can play with moving the pigment around. You can always add more after as well. Add more pigment after if you need to. So I have a little bit of a pool of water happening here because of my paper is moving. So you can see I'm just moving it around a little bit and the pigment's kind of shifting a little bit. But I'm going to put a little bit of extra. I have a lot of water on this one, so I'm actually going to get a paper towel and blot it. But play with the movement of the colors based on the water you use. This is one of the really neat things about watercolor is that anything can really happen. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of paper towel and just blot up some of the water because there's just a little too much, and that's okay. So just keep this paper towel handy. I'm going to grab a little more pigment. And I'm just going to put a little more pigment in. It has a little bit more water, but that's okay. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. This petal's a little bit bigger. I had an odd number of petals, so I'm just kind of rolling with my inaccuracies here, which is fine. This is all for fun anyways. Sometimes things don't have to be perfect. Imagine that. And once you get really good, you can then sell your stuff. But as you practice, it's okay to have an odd number of petals. You'll remember to count them and be more accurate next time, right? These are all really easy things. Low risk, just having fun, enjoying the process. But again, I want to thank you for being here. I hope you're having a nice time. Watercolors can be very inspiring. You can tip and shift your canvas if the water's pooling up in one area or another. If you have too much water, you can easily blot it up. If it's moving in the wrong direction, just blot up a little bit of the water with a corner of a paper towel. It's no big deal. Let it dry, and you can always go back and add more too. But I love how mine's kind of like not perfect. It's turning a little bit, which is kind of fun. And I might do purple, like a dark purple in some of these next areas. So I'm going to let those blue areas dry. And I might mix like a dark purple for my next color. But I definitely want to go back and I want to bring some oranges in again too. So maybe my next layer, I try to use matching colors and themes here for the painting. So whatever colors I've used, I want to bring them back in. So I've done the blues and I've done the greens. So I'm going to do a little bit of the purple, but then I'm going to bring in some of the oranges and the reds again in the next layers. So this is a purple. I'm just doing a little bit of outlining, and this is pretty dark. So I could just dip my brush. Ooh, well, this one's going to have purple in it too, apparently. If you ever make a mistake, just quickly blot it up. No big deal. Oops. Go nice and slow. My water's just dripping everywhere. And this purple got really close to the blue, and it's actually bleeding into the blue, which is a good example of trying to stay, if you're going to paint immediately, to stay away from those areas. It's okay. These can have a little bit of purple flare. Let's just add a little purple flare so they all match. No big deal. Ooh, that looks good with a little bit of purple coming into it, actually. Just going to embrace my mistake and add a little bit of purple to the tips of these blues, and it looks kind of cool. I'm just going to do it consistently around. So accidents, fun accidents happen, right? I might even bring in a little bit more pigment to make it a little more punchy. And this is one of the cool ways that a watercolor painting can evolve. I'm going to add a little bit more darker contrast on the edges of these blues. It's always good to start light, but being bold and brave with your darker contrast, it really can bring your artwork to life. So I would say try to be intentional of where you want to use darker contrast. Some of you may have just gone darker, and that's okay, but this is just one way people experiment with watercolor, is where they want to make things darker, where you want to hold white space, right? So let's see here. I have a purple here. I'm going to bring in a little bit of blue to my purple because I don't like the exact color. So always mix the color you want first on your plate over here before you do the work on your paper. Okay. I'm just going to slowly, oh, this is a bluish purple now. It's kind of pretty. I'll add a little more purple to this as I play with my color blends. But I'm just doing the secondary color. I'm going to leave a little bit of white space in between some of these so it doesn't bleed like crazy. And you can see the shape is really starting to come to life. It's about being consistent with what you put where. Again, mine was not perfectly symmetrical. I was just trying to be as even as possible. Let's bring in a little more purple now. And you can do purple on the edges. Bring a little bit more water in if it's not blending perfectly. There we go. And I want all these to sort of match. I'm kind of going all over the place here, but I'm going to try to do a little bit of purple, make it more of a purple color in some of these if I can. And I can let it dry and always come back to it too. Or even let it dry just a little bit, which is another fun part. It's kind of going around the edges and making a little bit of little tiny touches with more of a contrasting, more of a bolder color just on the edges of these petals. Little touches around the outside, on the inside of the edge. Really fun things can happen. So if you are doing one layer, maybe go back to another and see what contrast you can add to the edges of another petal. So I'm going back to some of these blue ones and just adding in a little bit more contrast where there's still wetness. And then you don't touch it. You just let the ink seep in and you just see what happens. And it's kind of fun to see how it dries. So over here, I could use a little bit more contrast. And then you just let it dry. And if you need to move around any of this, if it's pooling up in areas, just use the tip of your brush. Okay. Maybe I want to go in to the middle and make a little bit more contrast around some of the edges in the middle one again. So while these ones are drying, I can always come in and make some modifications to any of the other layers. So it's really fun to kind of go back in and do some outlining. Or add a little bit more contrast where you may need it. It's absolutely up to you. You can pick and choose some of those and make some of those choices. Like if one looks a little boring, go in and add a little drop of red somewhere on it and see what happens. Or add a darker bit of pigment on it on an edge and just see how that dries. Kind of neat. Okay. So it's kind of fun to see it evolve. Mine's fairly light still for the most part, if we think about the contrast of the inspiration. But I want you to continue to work at your own pace. I'm going to let mine dry as we go, but I'm going to bring in a little bit of a red. I'm making a little bit of a red and a little bit of orange. I'm getting those colors ready so I can do my next layer is going to have more of the reds and oranges again. And I'm going to kind of go back and forth a little bit. Maybe I'll do, these are some bigger designs. Maybe my next designs will be a little bit more detailed. So let's see here. Maybe I will do a different shape. Maybe I'll just do a teardrop shape. Let's see. Maybe on top of these purples. Oh, and it bled right there. So I got to be a little careful. I'm just going to be really playful with this design. I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe it's like a little lotus right here. A little bit of a lotus on top. Again, I don't know what this is going to look like. You can use the inspiration for an idea. You can go with the flow. I'm going to turn my canvas. This is a very specific design. So I'm going to just fill this in with a little bit of water. It's going to be orangey, but I'm going to bring red into this. So it bleeds a little red, a little orange. So I'll do one first and I'll rinse and repeat this around. So I'm going to grab a little bit of red and tuck in a little bit of red into some of this design. I'm just going to let it dry and I'll come back to it. So it's a little bit of a flower burst. I'm going to do this same 5-petal design on top of each of my purples. So I'm going to turn this. Again, you're going to have your own ideas. Just go with the flow here. Let's see. So I did orange. I'm going to mix a little bit more orange so I have it. It's kind of a watery orange to do the first bit, and I did one single, and then I did two on each side. So I did 1, 2, 3. If anyone knows me, I love painting like lotus flowers. It's so fun. We don't do enough of them, so maybe we should do another one in the future. And with a little water, I'm just going to fill this in. And I might lose some of those connecting lines, but for me, that's okay. And then with this water on water technique, I'm going to bring in the red. So the red's going to kind of seep into some of these other areas. So watch this. With a little bit of red, I'm just going to touch a little bit of red on the tips of each of these flowers. My red needs a little more contrast, so I need to bring in a little more pigment. So I'm going to bring a little bit more pigment onto my plate. And it's just going to kind of bleed and blend. I'm going to do a little more down here. So again, this is your artwork. You pick and choose your destiny here. I'm going to let that dry. Spin this around a little bit. This is getting pretty bold with some wacky shapes, but guess what? I'm okay with that. I do have some pencil lines right here. I'm going to erase really quick, gently, to try not to disrupt anything that might be wet. And I have one over here too. All right. So then I'm just going to rinse and repeat these designs. And sometimes these mandala designs they could easily take a couple hours to do. So always just take your time. Everyone paints at different speeds. So just go at your own speed. If you need to pause the video, you're welcome to pause, but I encourage you to watch the video through entirely. So you can always just listen to my voice when you're watching these videos and just keep painting at your own speed. That's what a lot of people do. Again, you don't necessarily have to follow along everything I'm doing, but I'm here to guide you and provide you a little support along the way. And if you have any specific questions, you're welcome to use the comments below to check in. And if you're participating in the live class, we will take a break in a little bit to show off our artwork. But let's just take a couple of minutes to continue to build out these designs and let things dry. I also don't want you lifting any watercolors up and things bleeding. So it's good to let things dry a bit before we lift and show, because I wouldn't want any of your details to change. So I have a pretty detailed design I'm doing here with these silly 5-prong oranges. So I'm just following what I've started here. Some of you may have done something more simple than me. I just am crazy and decided to do something a little bit more detailed. So I'm going to do 5 leaves and then I'll fill those in. Again, I'm just doing consistently. It may not be exactly the same on each round, but it's okay. At least visually, they will look similar. And again, I'm using a wet outline on dry paper, but I'm doing I'm filling it in with a wet technique, and I'm using the wet technique to bring in the ink. So the ink spreads and creates a really fun blend between the reds and the oranges. So that's just a fun technique I'm being really playful with. I'm not striving for it to be one thing or another. I'm just going to let it dry and see what happens. And you can see how the color is just kind of moving around a little bit. Super fun. Oh, again, keep your paper towel handy. I've dropped multiple drops of things on my paper, and with a paper towel, a dry paper towel, you can easily kind of blot it up pretty quickly. So keep a paper towel on hand if you don't have one already. I'm really like holding on to mine because I'm awfully drippy today. So there's my outline, and then I can fill it in. I fill it in with a lighter color. I try anyways, so I can control how much pigment I bring in. But it's up to you. We're all at different levels, and you know, we've all practiced different techniques with watercolor. Maybe you've done watercolor before, maybe you haven't. every piece of art is a little bit different. And unless you do the same thing all the time, it's really important just to be open-minded to what could happen when you're painting. So, and I say that because really cool things happen when you don't always have a plan. And it's really fun to see the possibilities of something cool and different without planning on doing something in particular sometimes, right? Sometimes we have an idea and we want to do it. That's fine too. All right. So those are done. They came out pretty cool. They kind of look like dragon fruits a little bit. So I'm going to let this dry. I do want to bring in a little more contrast to some of these pinks on the interior. So while that's drying, I'm going to go in and get a little bit of like a darker red, and I'm going to make this a little more punchy. So less water, more pigment will give you a darker color. This is kind of a dark raspberry. I'm going to go for more pigment, less water on my plate. And I have like a darker cranberry nearby. So I'm going to make this a little darker. And I'm going to add a little bit of that detail to some of the interior ones. And one way of doing that is if I want to do wet on wet, I can just re-wet it. And just bring in this and just kind of let it flow around a little bit. There's so many different ways of bringing in colors for watercolor. You can just paint with this like acrylic, that's okay too. But one of the fun things of practicing with watercolor is letting water flow and kind of help depict the design and the color a little bit, which is really fun. I had a little too much water there. So I'm just adding a little more contrast on the outside of some of these. This one has a little more than others. So I'm just gonna kind of move this pigment around with the tip of my brush. Just little dabs and touches will help move the pigment in and around. And if you want to put a little water down first, again, wet on wet technique, it will help. And then bringing in a little pigment, it will help that pigment kind of dissolve and spread out a little bit versus just painting it on. So you can play with that a little bit if you wish. But I'm just bringing in a little bit more pigment here. And you could just do a little bit of a drip of water with darker color too on the tips of these and just see how it flows out. You can pick and choose. And if you see something you like or something you think is going to be cool, just let it dry and just see what happens. It dries in a way where the pigment sticks to the paper and will provide these really cool shapes. So I'm just going to let those dry and see what happens. I created a little bit more contrast, which is what I wanted. Okay. Now, your paper may start to bend or turn a little bit. I have a little bit of bending. I have a little bit of a wave in my paper, which you may not be able to see in person here. But I'm just going to give this a minute to dry. I definitely want to add a little more blue contrast. I really like the darker blue. So I'm going to be a little bold and I'm just going to show you what it's like. I'm going to mix a little bit of a darker blue and I'm going to do some darker blue on the outside edges here. I like the contrast. It's really fun to see the contrast with watercolors. But we did all of our lighter base work first, which is really important. So I'm just going to mix a color again up here. So this is the color that I'm mixing. See how it's a little bit darker? And I'm just going to slowly bring it into the edges. Some of this is still wet, some of it's not. So anywhere it's not wet, I can just do a little bit of water. Maybe even a drip of clean water just to see how it flows. But on the outside edges here, you can just do a drip of water too. That's totally fine. And then any dark pigment will kind of just flow and go, which is really fun. So you can kind of pick and choose where and how you might want to bring in darker pigment. You may not want to, which is totally fine. All right, and I'm going to make sure that the blue edges are fairly wet, and I'm going to just do a couple drops of the darker pigment just to see what happens. So I'm doing a wet on wet technique to bring in more darker pigment along the edging. So if you want to create that wet base first, you can do this wet on wet technique to bring in a little bit of that flow. And if things are pooling up, like this one's pooling a little bit, just use your finger, hold down your paper and just shift the flow. And if it's too much water, you can just blot it up a little bit. And it can be scary to bring in dark pigment since we've been doing some light things, but it can have some really beautiful effects as secondary accents happen. All right, so I have lots of things going on here. Looks good. I'm just going to keep working my way around. So I'm going to grab a little bit more dark pigment. And again, this is just me. And if you don't want to do dark pigment, if you want to keep it all really lighter colors, that's absolutely fine. You do you here. But I intentionally want to make some of these a little darker. So again, you always start with the lighter colors and you add darker accents as a secondary step. And I like having a little bit of lightness to these too. So for me, I like the balance of a little of this, a little of that. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry. I've added some, I might add more. It's kind of fun to see how things can go and change. But at about in 10 minutes at the top of the hour, we'll do a little bit of a show and tell. So we'll give you all an opportunity to play with some edging. I might bring in a little bit more darker contrast on some of these other flowers that I just put in. A little bit more of a red touch where it may be orangey. Again, letting things dry for a little bit and coming back to it's really fun. And you can decide how far out and how far out you want to bring your mandala design. I might do a layer of these blues and greens next since I haven't brought that out yet, right? So I started with these pinks and burgundies. I did some blues. I brought those burgundy colors out and I did some purples and blues. I haven't done any of these blue greens again. So if I want to maintain a color palette, I can easily say what color should I do next on my next design, right? And then I figure out, do I want to do petals? Do I want to do another smaller design? Do I want to do a bigger design? You can kind of pick and choose there. But I'm going to give this a minute to decide, to dry, and then I will decide. But you can also take your pencil and do a little bit of sketching if you want to. If you don't want to be bold and brave and just start painting, you can do another design. So I may do a more solid design. And this may be one of my final big parts. So I might do like a big petal here. Maybe it'll be like here and down. Well, this will be interesting. It kind of swoops 1, 2, and down. So this will be different, but I'm going to just be bold. You all know me. I love doing things that are a little different. 1, 2, and down. 1, 2, and down. Kind of looks like holly a little bit, but don't do what I'm doing if you don't want to. 1, 2, and down. 1, 2, and down. Oh, and I just ran my finger through wet paint, so I'm going to quickly blot that up. It's helpful having that paper towel handy. And if you have any bleeding from one color to another, just grab a paper towel and just blot it up. I had a little bit of my orange spill in, so that's okay. And it can bleed into one to another if that's a part of your design. That's totally fine. I'm just going to find the tip here. I'm just doing a little sketching. 1, 2, and down. 1, 2, and down. And then if I decide I don't like this, then I can just do something else. But I'm just being really playful. 1, 2, and down. 2, and down. So I could see what that looks like. Could be kind of fun and different. And then maybe I'll do like another design here to finish it. So I'm kind of playing with what I want my finished design to be. I think I want these to be more rounded. So it's just a little bit of planning. So I have a little bit of sketching for my final design. I can decide if that's what I want or not. And before you paint, it's okay to make a choice. Is this what I want to do? And I might change it up a little bit. These look like too much like leaves to me, so I'm just changing it a little bit. And I'm adding a little bit more detail. So if you want to use a pencil like me and just do a little sketching to do a little bit of pre-planning, you're welcome to. Once I get the final design that I like the most, I will erase some of my lines so it's nice and soft. And this is a really good example of the process of art, as it's kind of going with the flow, but kind of trusting your intuition along the way. So like if you don't like something, to not paint it kind of thing, or to make a choice to do a different thing. Let's see here. Okay. Very different, but I have a lot of lines going on, so I'll kind of see what happens. I might leave some of these lines on just to use them as shapes. But everyone, again, is doing things a little differently. So I encourage you to go with the flow. If you want to do sketching, do sketching. If you would like to keep painting, keep painting. Any lines you like, you can do a gentle erase. Any lines you don't like, go ahead and erase those. And this is good because it's giving everything an opportunity to dry. If you have any questions throughout this class, do not hesitate to ask. I'm here to support you along the way. I'm just refining some of these shapes. I'll bring this up close in just a minute to show you what's going on with my sketching process here. It's a little all over the place, so let me clean it up a little bit. I'm trying to be as symmetrical as possible. I'm not being uber perfect today, so if there's anybody out there that's type A watching this, you might be cringing a little bit. A lot of folks like doing even lines and having them all be the exact same size. You can do as much or as little of that as you wish. This is really our first class, so this is a great way for you to kind of take a stab at doing a mandala with your own designs in mind. And I'll hold this a little closer. You may or not be able to see it. But I'm just going to pick some of my initial shapes. I'm going to do the blues and greens just to jump in, but I'm going to mix the color first. So blues and greens for me again were, and again, use your own colors like we talked about, go at your own speed. But I have a green here and a blue. So I'm going to come over here and get some of my green. I'm going to grab this green over here. I'm mixing the green that I want first. I might add a little bit of my Kelly green to it. Getting your colors prepared, especially if it's for a large area, is really important so you have enough of that paint pigment to kind of spread the love. And again, start with lighter colors and work your way dark. I'm going to add quite a bit of water to this because I can always get more. And now this is around my orange. I'm going to stay away from my orange right now because it is wet. So I'm going to do some really gentle outlining around my orange so it doesn't touch it. If my green and orange touch, it's going to be a brown mess. So I'm going to go around it right now. I do have pencil lines, which I will be able to see, which is fine. I'm keeping them there for just the purpose of today's class. But if you wanted to do a soft erase on your pencil lines, that's fine. But I'm going to use a little bit. I'm going to do a water on water, but I'm just doing an outline of this shape so everybody can see it first. And then I'll fill it in for you. Uh-oh, stay away from that orange. Stay away from your orange, like me. Trying to anyways. Get a little excited sometimes. I can always go back and go a little closer after. But with today's class, since, we're doing it together. Oh, see, my orange got touched. That's okay. I'm going to fill this in with a little bit of this green water, and I'm going to bring a little bit of the blue into it. So it's a little bit of a water on water technique. I kind of went around the orange entirely. You can see my outline you can see the outline first. If I grab a little bit of my blue, I'm just going to touch a little bit of the blue in and just see what it does. And if it's wet enough, you can go back and add more. So now I'm going to do the next one, which is around this orange one. And if I don't like the green, I can always change the color, right? It's not a big deal. So just take your time. You'll know what to do, what areas to stay away from, what areas you can spend a little bit more time. This actually is rounded here. I'm gonna do a little bit of an outline. I made the tips of these less holly-like and rounded them because it looked a little too holiday here for me. So let's see, I'm just gonna go around this gently. I'm staying away from my orange and away from my blue right now just because some of this is still wet and I don't want my orange and my blue and my green to mix. That'd be very bad. But I'm doing this base green first, and while it's wet, I'm gonna go in and add blue. So if I come in here, I fill all these nooks and crannies with this green. I can do a dot of blue and I will spread blue detail within the green area. So there's that. Again, if you happen to get into another color nearby, just quickly grab your brush. And I'm going to add a lot more blue to this. So I'm doing some major blue while it's wet so the colors can dissipate and spread and have fun and be playful. And if I need a stronger blue pigment, I can go bring in a stronger blue pigment, right? It'll bleed to the edges. It will go to the insides. You can always do more blue pigment after too, right? In those dual layers. So you can see that's really cool. And I did a little bit of white spacing around this orange because I did not want it touching it. So I'm using a really small brush with a nice fine point tip to manage where I'm putting that outline of color and then where I want to drop color in. Okay. And if you don't like the way a color is drying, just kind of use your finger, wipe up and move it around. But for me, I want to add more contrast to those, but I'm just showing you what some of these basic shapes are. So I'm just going to keep working my way around. I'm going to have us keep painting for right now. We're all in the groove, but I'm so excited to see what you're doing. If you're not yet a part of our Patreon community, I encourage you to join. It's a great place to stay connected with others and follow along tips and tricks. It's so much fun to see everybody's different designs and their interpretations on how they do each of our classes. And for those on the live call, I absolutely have loved seeing your artwork evolve over the years. You both are so talented and have both very different styles. Everyone has a different painting style. And you figure that out the more you paint, which I'm sure any of you could, if you may already know that and understand. All right. And I'm going to do a little bit of an outline here. And I'll use a little water and a little green to fill this in. And then I'll drop my blue into the green. So it's wet paint, wet green, and I'm bringing in wet blue paint to give it that really cool flow effect. And I'm just gonna use a little water to spread out this light green paint first. I want to make sure there's this green watery paint all over before I bring in my blue. So there's a base coat of green. So the blue can just kind of flow where it wants to. So it's always good just to take your time. I'm bringing this line in really close to the orange without actually touching it. That's where a nice fine brush is really helpful to kind of manage where that paint might flow to. So there's green. I'm going to take my blue. I think I might need a little bit more. Oh yeah. I want to make it a little bit more navy. So a little bit of black. Here we go. I'm just going to do a couple drops here and there. Well, this is a lot of pigment to it. Just add a little more water if you need to. And if you need to move around any pigment that's sticking in places, use the tip of your brush and drag around the pigment. It's really fun. Dragging around the pigment for it to show up in areas that are important to you. Like I want there to be more of that on the edges. Your brush can be a little wet, it can be a lot wet. Play with that. That's a really fun part of watercolors, to see how you can manage the darkness and the lightness of the pigment and putting it in the right areas based on what your vision is or what your idea is, right? So that's where this all takes a little practice. It's really therapeutic just to kind of move around paint. Over here, I'm going to add a little bit more blue pigment. Just doing a little touch of blue with the tip of my brush. And it's going to dry really neat. So it's kind of fun to let it dry and see what comes out. So I have 3 more of these. It might take me an hour or two, ladies. You always just take your time. Mandalas have a lot to them. So always just follow a consistent process. It always depends on the amount of detail you do too, right? Some of you might be doing just like bigger shapes. Some of you might be doing more fine work detail. Just rinse and repeat these designs. Turn off your brain a little bit. Enjoy the process. Again, I'm using this green as a base wet, painting around these little orange details. Those orange details are drying now, which is awesome. You can start to see how things are drying up. It's really fun. Really fun. But I want to thank you for being here. It's really hard to make time for ourselves sometimes. And even though we may have other things you need to do, or you have oodles of laundry, if you're like me, you're really good at leaving a laundry basket, just doing what it needs to do for a minute. If you need to do other things, that's okay. Laundry isn't going to run away, and you'll still have your clean clothes. Don't worry. But take time to do something for you. My husband probably wouldn't agree with that, but that's all right. But just enjoy this process. And I'm filling this in with a nice light green, just like I did before. And I'm going to bring blue into this. I'm going nice and tight to the orange. If your orange is dry, you can go as tight or as far away as you wish. But I'm moving some of this green paint around. You can see it's kind of pooling up in areas. It's because my paper is bending in different ways, which is kind of fun and neat. But I'm going to bring in a little bit more blue now. And if you need a little more water for that blue to really blend and be playful, bring in an extra drop of water and just see what happens. If you need to move your canvas around because it's pooling up in one area, push your canvas down and bend it a little bit and see what happens. Sometimes people tape watercolors to board so it's totally flat. If you don't want any pooling to happen, that's one thing we can try for our next class. If people want to see how that may affect their overall, we could tape our paper down to a board so it's totally flat and you're in control over where things are pooling or not. But you can catch things before they dry. If you have little pools happening, you can blot them up if it's not taped to a board, or you can blot it up or move it around with the tip of your brush. So you can make some of those choices. But it's kind of neat to see what happens. I'm just gonna blot, I have a little bit of a pool happening over here. I'm just gonna blot it up just a little bit. Even though I like the contrast, it just, a little bit of the blotting doesn't hurt. Gotta love a dry paper towel. All right, so I'm gonna let those dry and I'm just gonna keep going. I have one more big green area to do. And you can see how my design has really evolved. And you might notice areas, some that you may be like, you know what, it's really too light right there. Like for me, I want to add a little more contrast in the middle. I could do that after, right? No problem. So this is the evolution of our art. And we talk about that a lot in our classes, is being patient with the process and just knowing your art is going to change and evolve. Oh, this one over here. Oh, there's another drop. Need to do this outer ring here. And I have some different color areas built in here, so I'll just do more details after. But I'm going to rinse and repeat this step, and you're going to be doing the same thing. So whether you're doing a very detailed design or a large design, just go at your own pace. Take a couple deep breaths. Enjoy the process. I'm using my green water to outline and fill this leaf or this design. And I'm kind of tucking it in and under. And our classes, if you're new here, our classes are usually about an hour and a half long. We try to keep them under 2 hours just for people's timing and their schedules. I'm going to use a really fine brush and I'm just going to come in here nice and tight to some of these oranges. You can decide how much white space you want and where, but I'm going to come in with my blue now and bring in a little bit of blue, dancing along. Again, it was wet green and I'm dabbing a little blue of wet blue in for a little of my bluish green color. And these are all coming out a little different, so it's kind of interesting to see the differences between one and another. If you need to make any more paints, feel free to make a little bit more paint. I'm making a little bit more of this darker blue. That was more black, not that much. Adding more water will allow you to, if you add too much pigment, adding more water will kind of die down that darkness a little bit. So pigment, water on your palette or water on your paint pad, your canvas too. So I'm just going to be playful here about where I want to add more contrast and not while things are still a little bit wet. I love doing a little bit of a drop of water and then doing a bit of paint inside of it because it kind of creates a little stream of color. It's really kind of cool. So again, be playful with trying a new technique if you haven't already. It's really neat to see what happens. Let's see. I have a little bit of pooling of color over here, so I'm just going to move it around just a smidge. It's really fun to watch the pigments flow from one area to another. You can use just the tip of your brush and just infuse a little color here or there, which is really fun. But again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to use the chat window. But I hope you're enjoying this. It's really fun to try something new, especially with bringing in different darker and lighter colors. Now, at this point in the class, we've been painting for over an hour. I want you to kind of reflect on what you've done so far. You can kind of shift your picture around a little bit. If you don't want it bleeding in from one area or another, you can just be careful to dab where you need to. Um, I am going to add a little more contrast on the interior as this is drying. And I'm just going to use plain old water just to kind of re-wet some of these areas first. That will give me control over how my ink will spread, if that makes sense. So a little wet on wet. I'm just bringing in a little more water. So I am in control over where this spreads. And I'm going to bring in a little bit of this blue. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just going to do a little bit of a bleed in. Of a darker blue, just as a secondary color. I'm just going to see what happens. I want it to be a little more contrast here on the interior. Just doing a little touch on the interior with a little bit of like a darker bluish black just to see what happens. And it's giving me kind of a fun tie-dye look a little bit. So I'm being really creative. I don't know what this is going to look like, but I'm going to let it dry and find out. Okay, so there's a little contrast there. I might do the same thing on the interior of some of these blue flowers. I want there to be a little more contrast. So I might just do a little bit of like outlining here. So you're going to play with what details, may mean the most to you. So different for everybody. I might do a little bit of water first, and then do a little bit of that water on water bleed technique. I don't play with contrast enough in watercolors, so I'm being really brave today and just being really vulnerable with you all and just trying it. Because it doesn't hurt to try new things, because really neat things can happen when you're brave enough to try something new. And that's what I'm going for today. I'm trying to see what a little bit of contrast will look like in some of these. And it's coming out pretty neat so far. And it's really just slowing down and being mindful of what you want to try, true. Like that's another piece of it. So I'm just staying on the bottom side of these flowers. I don't want to take away from any of my other colors, but I'm just adding a little extra contrast just to see what happens. And you can do water first and then drip the color into it, and then it will spread more evenly versus you just painting the color on. It's kind of like something you have to try. So water first and then dip the color in. Kind of like how I was dipping the blue into the green. There, that one came out really neat. So you can see, I'll hold this up in a minute. I'm not going to lift it right now because who knows what will happen. But I had this darker bluish black up here. I'm just dipping in a little bit of that contrast in this space. You can always add like a little salt. If you want to get a little crazy, you could sprinkle a little salt on your watercolors too, and that will make things like infuse and look in different ways, which is kind of neat. So if you ever want to get a little crazy, sprinkle a little salt and it will make some bursts. I can go get a little bit upstairs and we can be a little daring here if you want to see it. But I'll let this dry for a minute. I have a couple more designs I need to finish out for the end of class. So I'm gonna finish out a couple of these final designs around the edges. So let's see. So I want to bring some consistent colors out. So some of my final designs might have this pinky red color, maybe a little more pink fuchsia color. So let me mix a little bit more of that. Again, I'm being mindful to use the same palette of colors so it all matches. So I kind of have like a nice rose fuchsia color. I'm going to make this a little darker. I'm going to add a little water to it, and I'm going to outline some of these spaces so you can see the designs that I pre-sketched. And I'm going to use a little bit of a light water. Again, I'll do water on water here so you can see how I infuse color. So I'm doing like a light water wash with this rosy, dusty rose color. I have a little bit of that outline here too. So I'm just going to outline that really quick. Okay. And then I can figure out what color I might want to infuse this with. Well, I think a purple might be really nice. Just a little bit of a purple. So let me mix a purple. So I'm going to infuse this dusty rose with a purple just to see what it looks like. And I want it to be have a little bit of contrast. So I'm going to add a little bit of this black in here just to see what happens. I'm going to make enough of this though, so I don't run out. Okay, so I'm just going to touch in a little bit of this darker purple. Oh, and this is neat. It's going to give us really cool infused look right there. And I'm going to let that dry for a minute, and I'm going to rinse and repeat this on these. And we'll continue on. A little water to fill this in. And then I'll infuse it with another color with our wet on wet technique. So a little bit of this purple, and I'll just infuse the edges and it will bleed right in and down. Okay. I'm just going to rotate my canvas. And this is the final rounding design that I'm doing. I need to make a little bit more of this purple. I cannot wait to see what you all are doing. I'm so excited to see it. If you are watching this recording, I encourage you to join our Patreon space. You can even join for free. You don't have to pay, and you can still share your work with us. But I always love, love, love seeing what you come up with in our classes. And for the ladies on the live, cannot wait to see what you're doing. This is like an end reveal. I'm like giving you all of the time in the space to play with your details in a non-pressured environment. And we're working on all these together. So I'm going to take this and keep working my way around. Using that paper towel, I got a little too close to my green and it bled in, which is okay. But I'm just going to be a little more careful next time. And I'm using water to create that water wash first. That's kind of the easiest part, is to create a space where you want to dip in and bring in more color. And I'm going to bring in some of this purple, especially on this outer edge. So you can pick and choose where you bring that in. Awesome. And if things are drying in certain ways and you don't like it, just use your paper towel and suck up some of that ink and just make some modifications. So it's all good. I'm just doing some fun lines for some of these final details on the edges, because why not? Just going to use a little bit of this pink here for this final shape. I have actually two final shapes here. Rounded, rounded, rounded. A little bit of water to fill in. A little bit of darker purple on the edges. Again, just finding, you'll find out what colors you like to kind of blend with others. Just kind of follow that feel as you keep going. Okay, and I have just one more space here. And then then there's refinements, right? So there's a point in this class where you let things dry, and if you want to add more contrast or make things lighter or darker in certain spaces, you can do that. Letting your watercolor dry and then going in and adding in a secondary color is really powerful because you're making choices of what details you want to work on and details you want to refine or change a little bit. And it's kind of nice to be able to walk away and come back to it. I have a little bit of green that bled into this one, so I'm going to let that dry for a minute and then I'll go repaint that. But it's up to you on always how much white space you leave in, this and that. If I wanted to come in here and there's too much white space in the middle, I can always come in here and maybe make some of those pink areas a little bit bigger now. So like if the blue for me is some of this is still really wet, so I'm not going to touch it quite yet. But if I wanted to eliminate any of this white space, I could come in and do that at any point. Bringing in just a little more oranges on the tips. Again, I'm looking for a little more contrast on some of these in the middle here. So I'm just bringing in a little bit more pigment just to the tip of my brush just to see what happens. You can have solid colors too when you do watercolor. You don't always need to blend one to another or this and that. It's just really personal preference. If you ever do too much pigment, just use the corner of your paper towel, kind of suck it up or blot it a little bit. It's very forgiving. But I'm going to add some contrast here on the edges for some of my final touches. So up here, I'm going to make this a little darker on the tips. And on this here, I'm going to make this a little darker. So again, find a rhythm and a design that works for you on where you feel like the overall design is done, but you can make refinements from there. And with watercolor, always, I didn't focus on leaving too much white space outside of leaving spacing, but sometimes with watercolor, you hold white space for different design elements. We didn't do a ton of that today. But I want you to, we did a little bit, but some of you may have done it intentionally or unintentionally, and it's always fun to see what happens there. But just know that that's another part of the process of watercolors is using white space intentionally, doing light colors intentionally in certain places. So your eye can be brought to certain areas for certain reasons, whether it's for lighting or specific areas to draw to. So there's a lot of intention that can be done with using lighter or even like leaving a lot bits of white space into watercolor. And that's a little more advanced. And maybe eventually we'll do that as a group. But for now, we'll just keep things really easy and fun. Maybe snow is a good example of leaving white intentionally. And you use a grayish shaded color to create a little bit of shade or shadows on snow, right? If we did watercolor for a winter scene. So maybe we'll do that in the upcoming months. That could be a fun thing to try together. So I'm just kind of finishing out these edges with a little bit of this darker contrast. And again, the darker contrast is something that you can do a lot of or none at all. It's absolutely up to you. Your choices as an artist. It's always fun to think about it. Maybe you'll say, maybe in my next piece, I'll do a little more darker contrast to see how that looks. Maybe some of you are doing it today. Either way, it's totally fine. And it might be a little uneven in areas. That's okay. Mine's not incredibly even in all areas. That's all right. Maybe do a little bit of outlining. Maybe you do some textures. Look around, see if you have any pooling of color that you like or don't like. I'm going to make a little bit of a dark purple for some of the purple I have here. I'm just going to add a little bit of darker purple contrast just in a couple areas. But I need to mix the right color first. And I like doing the wet on wet first. So it allows you to kind of manage and control the space and what you're going, especially if there's a neighbor nearby that's still a little wet. Again, I want to thank you for being here. I hope that you enjoyed yourselves. It's always so great to have you. If you have any follow-up questions, ladies, or anyone watching the recording, please do not hesitate to ask. But thank you again for joining, and I hope to see you again in the future.